What is up, beautiful people? This is your girl Nicole Denise, and we are back at it again with another video. First of all, how y'all doing? How your mama doing? How your daddy doing? How your kids them doing? And your uncle, your sisters, your cousins. How's everybody doing? And most importantly, how are you doing? Today I'm in my car. I'm running a few errands, waiting on my sister to come out of the store. And when I was driving, this video idea came to me about my experience in therapy. So I wanted to talk about that. Mainly being a black woman in therapy. Number one, why I started therapy. Number two, what my experience has been with therapy. And number three, am I still in therapy, and what are my thoughts, aspirations moving forward. And then lastly, I kind of want to give my recommendations, if any. So with that being said, let's hop right into this video. So for starters, y'all hear the air conditioner because my car is reading 95 degrees. It is summertime in Florida, baby. So we got the air conditioner. I don't have it blasting, but it's on. But with that being said, the first thing I want to talk about is, number one, why I decided to get in therapy. So the reason why I decided to get in therapy, I started therapy in 2020 during the pandemic. And this was in May of 2020. The first time I thought I needed to see a therapist or speak to somebody or talk to somebody was like when I was 19, back in college. I still remember very vividly being on the phone with my mother, crying after I left a doctor's appointment because she was trying to give me Ativan for anxiety. And in my mind, that equated that she thought I was crazy. And I was like boo, crying on the phone like, Mom, she want me to take these drugs. I don't want to take these drugs. And my mom, I was like, but I feel like I need to talk to somebody. And my mom was like, then you need to go talk to somebody. There should be somebody on your campus, you know, like a school psychologist or somebody that you can talk to. I didn't. I continued to cope the best way I knew how. And after that, it wasn't until 2020 in my adulthood where we were in the thick of the pandemic, and I realized that I was not handling the isolation well, and I was like, I need to talk to somebody. Number one reason why it took me so long to get into therapy, I think like the hindrances for me getting into therapy was, number one, stigma. There is a stigma in the black community about talking to somebody. And that's talking to somebody outside of your family or outside of your religious circles or things like that. There is this huge stigma in the black community that says you don't tell other people your business, and you don't want people to see you sweat, and you don't want people to know that there's something wrong with you, or that you have some issues that you may be dealing with, or that you can't handle life on your own. So for a long time, I would just sit with myself. And you know, for me, a coping mechanism and an outlet for me has always been journaling. I have stacks and stacks of journals from years and years of journaling. I've always been a writer. I've always journaled my feelings and my thoughts. So that has definitely helped me unload a lot of things. But for the most part, I was very skeptical about talking to somebody. First of all, talking to people in my family. Second of all, talking to somebody outside of my family was just like oh hell no. But at the same time, because I've also on the flip side been a very open person and been a very against the grain type of person, and I don't really live up to the status quo. I've always walked to the beat of my own drum. So I always knew I wanted to talk to somebody. I just felt like I kind of had to do it privately, you know, or quietly, and not let people know that I was talking to somebody, for just fear of the judgment and fear of having to explain my reasoning for it. The second thing that I always was really, really nervous about was money. Like, I always thought that psychology and psychiatrists and therapists and people in that field, even social workers, it was very expensive to get help in that area, to get therapy, because all of my experiences with seeing therapists was always like through movies and stuff like that. They were always like these rich white people going to their therapist. So they had time and they had money to go talk to therapists. And I feel like I didn't have that disposable income. But when I made up my mind in 2020, I was like, I'm going to talk to somebody, and I don't care how much it is. It's so amazing because I was in therapy for a full year and a half and never thought about where the money was going to come from. And it was on automatic payment. And every time that payment needed to be made, there was never a, there was never a delay. There was never insufficient funds. The money just always was there for therapy. So when I made the decision and I made the choice, the money was just there. And it wasn't, I promise you, it wasn't something I think about because I put it on automatic payment. And for me, that is a huge thing when it comes to my money story personally. And I want to talk about that in another video, my specific money story, and even me writing a book about money and stuff like that. But for me, that was always a huge fear of mine, putting things on automation and putting my bills on automation. It was a huge desire. Like, I wanted to do that because I don't want to have to think about money, but then also a huge fear because how I know that money going to be in there. And especially being an entrepreneur for 10 years now, you know, we create our money. We literally take things out of our brains, create them, and then pull money in our paychecks out of the air. So I always was kind of skeptical and nervous about having things on auto pay, but every time it came around for my psychology or therapy bill to be paid, it was paid. So those were the two main barriers that kept me from therapy for so many years. And in 2020, I just decided that my mental health and the state that I was in, I was like, was more important than me being stigmatized or being afraid of not having money, because I had money for everything else, so I should be able to have money for myself as well. So now we get to the how. Like, how did I get in therapy? What was my avenue in which I went? The easiest way that I found getting into therapy was just going through one of the apps. The first app that I went through was BetterHelp, and actually I researched both of them. I downloaded BetterHelp and I downloaded Talkspace. And for some reason, BetterHelp just jumped out to me. And I think it was because you could literally be matched with a therapist in 24 hours. Because a lot of times with traditional therapy, like meeting somebody in their office and things like that, is that it'll take about a week or a couple weeks for you to match with somebody or find somebody that your insurance takes and things of that nature. But because we were in the pandemic and everybody was already going virtual and telemedicine was like a big push during that time, especially for people psychologically who needed like the psychological support, they made it very easy and they made it very quick for people to pair with therapists. So literally I got on BetterHelp. I filled out the application, and you could put in like a financial thing, like what your finances are, and I qualified for like a scholarship. So whatever I paid a percentage. I got a percentage off according to my finances. I can't remember right now exactly what I paid because, again, that was like 2.5 years ago. But yeah, I know that I got a percentage off for like the first 6 months of my therapy, and then after that I started paying the regular price. So I went through BetterHelp, and what they do is they kind of have like a questionnaire, and they're kind of ask you like, hey, what are you coming to therapy for? And you kind of fill out like, you know, you answer questions like, how do you feel on this day? How often do you feel this way? You know, things like that. So they can kind of gauge where you are mentally and emotionally. And then from there, they kind of pair you with somebody who specializes in those modalities, as well as the type of therapy that you need. So I was paired really quickly, and I was paired with the I asked because I wanted a woman. I was specific about that. It lets you be able to choose if you want a man or a woman. I wanted a woman, and I wanted a woman of color. I wanted a black woman, but I wanted a woman of color. And I was in Florida. That's also too a big thing. You have to get paired with people who are licensed in your state. So I was in Florida at the time, and I got paired with my first therapist. She was not black, but she was Hispanic and white. And my first, what I liked about the apps too is that they gave you different ways that you can interact with your therapist. The first, you could either text, you can either use phone calls, or you could either do face-to-face, like virtual, like a Zoom call, basically, where you see your therapist. It's so funny because I remember I don't know if the word is ashamed. It wasn't shame. I don't know what the emotion was, but I was so afraid of being vulnerable with somebody that I just started, when I first started my therapy, and I want to say like for the first 3 or 4 months, we just talked on the phone. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want her to see me because I knew I was going to be crying. And it was just very vulnerable for me to like pour my all out with a stranger, so to speak. So I just talked on the phone, and I felt more comfortable doing it that way. So now I want to talk about my experience in therapy, what I learned with my first therapist, because now I am on therapist number 3. So my first therapist, I love her. We still talk on Instagram. She was so good. Her name was Rachel, and she was just amazing. She was amazing. And she was very patient. She was very understanding. She listened, and I like how she asked questions. And what I mean by that is, I'm the type of person, I know how to ask good questions, which makes me a great journalist, which makes me a great conversationalist in general, just which makes me, I know the questions to ask. I know the questions that people want to know, and then I know how to ask questions, because sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So, I know when I first started therapy, I was very like black and white in my thinking. It was like, it is or it isn't. And Rachel was the first person to challenge me in that space of saying, well, what if 2 things could be true at the same time? And I was like, girl, what did you talk about? What you mean? And she was like, what if you could be both excited about your life in this area and then also afraid, or also sad, or also mourning, or also, you know? And I started to think about like, well, maybe life isn't so black and white. Maybe my emotions aren't so black and white. And then speaking of emotions, Rachel was the first person to give me an emotional wheel, like an actual printout that showed me all the different emotions that we can experience as humans. Because I was the type of person, because I was reprimanded for being so emotional and for being such a crybaby or a waterhead when I was younger, that I just cut off my tears. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just not gonna cry, or I'm not gonna show you that I'm crying. I would go hide and cry, basically, because it was seen as, and it was brought to my attention in that space when I was younger, of like a weakness. So I wasn't gonna be weak, you know, especially as a black woman. That's not taught. That's not okay to be weak as a black woman. So basically what I did, I would just hide my tears or hide and cry. So all the emotions that I knew up until that point was, I am mad, I am sad, I am happy. 3 emotions. That's what I thought we had. And maybe like frustrated or irritated was a 4th, you know, honorable mention. When Rachel gave me this wheel and I saw all these different emotions on here, where I could be like, I could be irritated, or I could be disappointed, or I was like, oh my gosh, like it really opened my eyes up to just emotions in general, and like how sometimes we lump all of our emotions under those main emotions that everybody else is comfortable with. Everybody's comfortable with happiness, they're comfortable with sadness, and they're comfortable with anger. But like, it's a whole plethora of other emotions that people don't have the language for and they don't tap into. And that specifically is how Rachel helped me. She helped me get the language of what I was feeling, because I knew what I was feeling and I could write it down, but being able to articulate it to other people, or stand up for myself, or say what I meant to other people, like it was very, I was very anti-confrontational. And it wasn't that I needed to fight some people in my life. It wasn't that, but I definitely needed to speak up in a lot of ways. And being with that version of Nicole, she was very broken. She was very afraid. She was very timid about her emotional state. Because at that time, I was at the height of my boss chicness. I was bringing in the money. You couldn't tell me nothing else. I was the boss chick. The one they show on Instagram, I was her. But I was miserable inside. And then my mind was always racing, and my mind was always to the next, and I could never really fully rest. And on top of that, I was going through a freaking global pandemic with the rest of the world. So you can imagine the anxieties of that, and then your family, and then it was a whole bunch of stuff. It was relationships falling apart. So that Nicole really got a hone on what I wanted my life to look like, especially in the emotional and the mental state. Now, because Rachel was not black, but she was a woman of color, I did feel comfortable sharing my most intimate parts with her. But also, too, there did come a time in our relationship where she did ask me, she was like, do you think you hold anything back because I'm not black? And I was like, I don't think so, because I trust you, but at the same time, let me think about that. And I realized that there were certain parts of me that I did, kind of keep to myself, because I'm like, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't feel like explaining that part of me. Because of course, race came up, socialization came up, religion came up, childhood, how I grew up and how I was reared, all those things came up. But there were certain topics that I just did not feel like having to explain to someone who wasn't black, because that's not their experience. But Rachel was very, what I liked about her is that she was very well educated, and she had a friend circle that was very eclectic as well as diverse. So she had black friends, and she did research about black people specifically and our psychological needs specifically and stuff like that. So I really appreciated the education that she put into being a therapist and being a thorough therapist. This therapy chapter ends after my therapist gets pregnant and she goes on maternity leave. So this is like a year and a half, and of course I had a breakdown. I was like, oh my gosh. So now to my second therapist. After I did my ending session with Rachel, and she did my whole assessment, and I have the paperwork of what we worked through, how I, what I improved in, what I still was working through, things like that, and what I wanted to, what my goals were for my next therapist. I felt really empowered, and I felt ready to go into the world. And I was like, oh, I got this. I don't really need a therapist. That was really my mindset. I was like, oh, I've learned so much. I've done so much with this therapist that I don't need therapy anymore. I thought I was fixed. And I'm using quotes of that on purpose, because I went into therapy thinking that there was something wrong with me. I was going to get these tools and I was going to be fixed. It wasn't until my second go round of therapy with a new therapist that I realized, girl, there's nothing wrong with you, and you're not going to therapy to be fixed, but you are going to therapy as a kind of like a maintenance plan. You kind of always need maintenance to keep it together. So fast forward, I moved to Georgia to live with my mother. I was exhausted. I closed my business. I closed my business in 2020. These were the big life transitions. I closed my business because I was burnt out. I had over 400 clients. I closed my business. Shut it down. I went into hibernation, and then I moved to Georgia. And I did all that within the span of 3 or 4 months, basically. I ended my lease. So me and my roommate ended my lease in Florida. And then I packed all my stuff, and then I moved in my car and I drove to Georgia. And I remember my mom asking me, she was like, well, what do you want to do when you get here? I said, to be honest with you, mother, I just want to rest. And she said, okay, come on. And dang, there is nothing like a mother's love, and it's nothing like a mother's come on, just come on. That was all the explanation she needed. She wasn't saying, well, what you gonna do for money and this and that, and she just was like, my child, my baby said she needed rest, so this is a place where she can rest, and come on. Also, in conjunction with that, my mom's cancer had returned, and she was just starting a new round and dose of chemo. for this second bout of cancer, because she was in remission, and then yeah. So in the back of my mind too, I was also like, well, we can kind of help each other, and I can kind of look after you, you look after me, this and that. So we've changed locations, but let me pick up where I left off. So I moved to Georgia. In life transition fashion for me, there's always a big ta-da that happens. And I remember quite literally, as soon as I pulled into my mother's driveway after 9 hours of driving, I get a phone call from a friend of mine, basically talking about how another friend of ours, it was just a whole big thing. It was a huge thing, and it was a big thing. And I was just like, you know what? I don't need this. I came here for respite. I came for rest. And I just was like, hey, I can't talk right now. And I left it there. And I remember just going into my mom's house, and she had the room. It was a 2-bedroom, so she had a room prepared for me. And I literally slept for a month. It sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I am not exaggerating. I went there, I slept, I ate, I would wake up and take showers, I would get back in the bed and go to sleep. And it was so interesting because that is kind of where my whole ideology for rest, and specifically rest for Black women, how it was revolutionary. So much so that I started writing a book about it. Ladies, get on me in the comment section if you're ready for this book, or you want this book, or you're ready for these worksheets and the workbook that I have to go with this, How Rest is a Revolution for Black Women. Because baby, I still ain't finished that book, and I have bits and pieces. I just need to sit down and write it, finish writing it. But yeah, if you're ready for that book, because I'm ready for that book. But also too, I feel like I'm the type of person, I have to go through some things so I can really be articulate about, you know, pointers or recommendations, or you get what I'm saying. So everything happens in its own timing, and it will come out when it's supposed to come out. But also too, I need to sit down and finish writing it. So I started writing this book, and being back in the house with my mom was really cool. It was cool at first. I'll say for the first 3 or 4 months, it was cool. But then my mom's cancer got aggressive, and because my mother is a strong Black woman, and she was raised to be a strong Black woman, so she hid a lot of the information from me, and I kind of had to overhear, you know, what was happening with her doctors, what was happening with the advancement of the cancer. And it made me extremely, extremely frustrated. So much so that I had an anxiety attack one day, and I realized, well, a panic attack, and I realized, oh, I'm not handling this so well. I do need a therapist. Let me find a therapist. So now I was like, okay, because it was literally like pulling teeth with my mother to get information about what was going on with her doctors and what they were saying. And she was just like, oh, I'm good, God is good. And I get it. I get what mothers do. I understand she was probably trying to protect me too. You know, I get it. There is no fault there. But also too, as somebody who is there and is like, I can help you, you don't have to do this by yourself, like, stop trying to be so damn independent. It was very frustrating for me. So I was just like, in order to be able to talk through those emotions and not that I was gonna blow up on my mother, but you know, exhibit those frustration towards her as she was going through this, you know, chemo, I said I needed to get another therapist. So enters Talkspace. I go to Talkspace this time. I'm in a different state, so there are different insurance ramifications and pricing and price points and all that kind of stuff like that. But this time I said, you know what, I want a Black woman therapist, because I don't want to have to feel like I'm restricted in what I'm saying, or I don't want to have to feel like I have to over explain myself. Like, I understand what you're saying, but this is actually what it means to be a Black woman and how we handle stress and how we handle anxiety. I wanted somebody who innately understood that, because that was also to her experience. Being in Georgia actually was much easier to find a Black therapist. Like, Talkspace was full of Black therapists, Black men and Black women therapists. I found one. I was looking through the profiles. Another thing, they let you read the profiles and things like that. I was looking through the profiles, and I was watching this particular Talkspace has where they can play their video. So I saw people's video about why they became a therapist and what therapy meant to them and how they handle clients. You know, and I'm all about energy. I'm all about energy. I know if it's right, if it ain't right, and I can tell through a video if I connect with somebody or not. So I'm scrolling. I'm probably like 10 videos in, 12 videos in. I'm just like, these women ain't it. I'm talking about beautiful women, older women, younger women, like women from all over the place who specialize in this, they specialize in that, and I was just like, I ain't found her yet. This ain't it. And then I came across her profile, I saw her picture, and I was like, that's her. That is her. And I chose her, and sure enough, our first session, we hit it off. So now, who is Nicole during this second round of therapy? So in this space, I have now transitioned into actually caregiving because my mother's cancer is very aggressive. So I'm now a caregiver. I'm also someone who is recovering from burnout. I'm also someone who is pivoting in life and trying to figure out what she wants to do in her entrepreneurial life. I'm also someone who has just ended a friendship that was very near and dear to me. Also ended a new friendship that was going somewhere, and I thought it was, but the person ended up being freaking manipulative and a whole bunch of undesirables, basically, that just didn't gel well with me. And it was so funny because when I moved to Georgia, she reached back out to me and was like, oh, I moved to Georgia too. I saw you move to Georgia, because she would follow my vlogs. And I was like, that's weird. Like, girl, why'd you follow me? But anyway, another story for another day. But anyway, so yeah, I was going through all those emotions, as well as being in Georgia. I don't like living in Georgia. I've lived in Georgia twice, and Georgia is just not my speed. I am a Florida girl. I need the sunshine. And then Georgia in the fall, when it rains and it's dark and it's pollen and my allergies and my bones hurt because it's cold outside. And then I don't do well in Georgia. Like, literally, I physically don't do well. I emotionally don't do well. Georgia is just not my state, period. So all of that is happening, and I'm like, I need a therapist. So I find a therapist. We hit it off. So what is different between this therapist and the therapist before is that I'm, first of all, a different version of myself. I come into therapy not as a newbie, so I do have some therapeutic tools, and I'm able to share with her kind of what I do as far as like grounding techniques and things that I do to kind of calm my anxiety when it comes up or when it flares up, or things that I do to, you know, get through the day. But really what I like most about this therapist and this second therapy relationship was because I felt like I was more confident in myself. So, and then I also felt more confident in being around or in conversation with a therapist who was a Black woman, who was also, I think she was probably about 10 years my senior. So she wasn't that far removed from me in age. And then as well as, like, I just felt like we connected, like, because she used to always say, I used to be wanting a friend like you. I used to think, she used to think, basically, as an outsider, sometimes you'll be looking around like, am I the only one who see this? We would have a lot of those type of conversations, and it was just really good. And it was very, like, big sister conversations, put it like that. And that's something that's so funny that I say that, and I'm really thinking about it now. That is something that I always craved. I always craved to be able to talk to somebody as like a big sister, and it be easy because I'm the oldest in my family, so my sisters came to me, you know, but there was nobody that the oldest goes to. So that was very refreshing in that therapeutic relationship where I can kind of go to, and we just had very easy conversations. But enters the perfectionist, the overthinker, the overanalyzer, and the doggone productivity monster that lives inside of me, which is good for being a boss chick. But when it comes to my emotions, she is mean as hell. So I remember one day in particular, you know, when we first kind of started, I think we were like a couple weeks in, and I was just like, you know what? I don't feel like we're getting in, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this, because this is just too easy. This is too easy. I feel like we're not digging deep. I feel like we're not going deep. I don't feel like I'm crying enough. Whatever it was, I just felt like we weren't making the mark as a therapeutic pairing. And I remember she just smiled and she looked and she asked me a question, because therapists know how to ask questions. She asked me a question. She said, wasn't that you who said that you were in a season of wanting rest and wanting ease in your life? And I was just like, yeah, so what you mean? Because again, this is the productivity queen talking. This is not the emotionally sound, well, I don't want to say emotionally sound. This is not the emotionally in tune, tapped in Nicole. This is the one that's saying, girl, we got shit to do. We don't have time to be over here talking about our feelings and shit. We got to make stuff happen. We got to make money. We got to do that. It was that version of me talking. And so when she asked those questions, I was like, yeah, and kind of like, what you mean by it? So basically, okay, yeah, I said it, but what? What they got to do with, I think this is too easy, and I feel like we're not getting anywhere. We're not climbing any ladders. We're not making a number. We're not making the mark. I just feel like, and she was like, didn't you say you wanted to like get out the rat race and not always be so stressed out about making the mark and making them? I was like, yeah. And as she kept asking these questions, I started to realize where this was going. I was like, oh. So she really helped me understand, like, if you want ease, you have to welcome ease in all aspects of your life. And for me, as a driven, ambitious, go-getter Black woman in America, that was a hard pill to swallow. Like, girl, how you gonna write a book on rest and you don't know how to rest for real? How you gonna want and desire ease and pray for ease and want everything to be easy and want things and say your mantras and your affirmations like money comes to me easy, relationships come to me easy, compatibility comes to me easy, collaborations comes to me easy, and then don't welcome ease and then want to fight for every damn thing? And I understand it was a knee-jerk reaction, because that is my default setting. My default setting is saying, get the scraps and make sunshine out of it. Make it happen. Do what you got to do. Hustle hard, grind. Like, that's a default setting, but that is also socialization. That is not my natural state. My natural state is very at ease and very at peace and going with the flow. But that hustle mentality and that hustle drive, that is a socialization that has been placed in me, because that's what I saw my mother do. And even seeing her not be able to physically, you know, hustle like she used to and make things happen, it was very reflective of like, not this could be you, but this is what happens when you burn yourself out and you refuse to rest. This is a consequence, so to speak. And so the second therapeutic session really helped me through accepting ease, resting, and with those two things came an amplification of my faith, because if I was going to rest and I was going to accept ease, I had to trust that what was for me is for me. I had to trust in the God I said I believed in. I had to trust that all things work together for me. And it didn't mean, because the scripture don't say all things work together for those who get out and grind and hustle and do everything and make, you know, turn shit into sunshine. That's not what the scripture says. It's not what it says at all. And I know people like to say, God does for those who do for themselves, or you take one step. When you take one step, God takes two steps. That is not in the Bible. That's shit that people say that we have accepted and adopted as our Bible or as our, like, those are just adages. You get what I'm saying? So I had to really lay all that aside. And also too, this therapy relationship the second time really helped me tap into what I believe Black womanhood is. And also too, it helped me like tap into the lives of other Black women. And what I mean by that is I realized, like, girl, you're not the only one. It helped me. That's what it really did. It reawakened the importance of community in my life, because for so long I felt like I had to be an island and that I had to just make shit happen myself because people ain't gonna understand, you know. And when you come from that space of being an outsider, or you come from that space of being like the outlier, the weird one, the one that nobody gets, the one that goes against the status quo, that walks to the beat of her own drum, you get used to being like, oh, they ain't gonna get it, so I'm just gonna do it anyway. You get what I'm saying? But also too, welcoming community, like, girl, you're not the only one. There's a whole bunch of weirdos just like you. There's a whole bunch of people who think like you. There's a whole bunch of women who've been through what you've been through, that you could glean from and get help from and get community from, and just get a woosah and a retreat from this like crazy world with. So that helped me understand that. And then as well, it helped me deal with the reality that my mom was passing away before my eyes. Yeah. And then when it happened, it helped me through the grieving process. She helped me start through the grieving process. Let me give myself a second. That was a lot what I just said. Let me. Sometimes we forget to breathe through it all. And we're so programmed to like just keep moving, like don't let them see you sweat, don't let them see you show any emotions. I just felt myself kind of like trying to push past all of what I just said. I said a lot. Yeah. My second therapist helped me get through the grieving or it's helped me begin the grieving process, you know, and helped me to healthily go through the grieving process. And that process still continues to this day, you know. And then even having to leave her because she's licensed in Georgia and not Florida, that within itself is its own grieving process, because you get used to talking to the same person, you get used to your routine, you get used to this person knowing who you are, and then just the thought of having to start all over with a different person is just daunting within itself. So I have been fortunate enough the first 2 times to get people that I click with instantly. This time I just don't feel like it's going to be that. I had my first introductory session with this therapist that I'm thinking about, you know, starting a therapy relationship with last week. And I actually have my second one tomorrow. It's so funny because this is the first time where I felt like we're still dating. You get what I'm saying? I didn't feel an instant connection with her. It's another Black woman. I really like her. But I don't know if I like her for me yet, if that makes sense. And a lot of people have always said to me, like, they've had apprehensions about therapy because it's like dating. You have to find the right fit and stuff like that. And I had just been fortunate enough with my first 2 therapists to be very like, oh, we clicked instantly. And it's so funny because a lot of times, like the friends of my life, that's how it kind of happened. Like we just click instantly. This is the first time I feel like I am putting effort into the situation. And I don't want to say it's uncomfortable. It's just different. It's different. But I'm allowing myself the space to feel what I feel. And right now what I feel is like, do I really want to do this? But it's like, girl, you want a therapist. I do. I want a new therapist. I want a Black woman. And I'm open to dating around until I find the right one. Because, again, this is my 3rd year in therapy. And it's almost 3.5 years. Yeah, this is my 3rd year in therapy. And I am not who I was when I first started therapy. So I need different tools. I need to be, you know, challenged in different ways or going to different parts of me. Like, there are certain things that I have resolved, certain issues. I've processed through certain emotions. So there are things that I don't need to retouch on. But then also too, with a new therapist, it's like you have to kind of go back to the beginning so they can get to know you. And just that whole process of like the small talk stuff is like, but I will say our first session went well, and she did have like 3 things that she said in our session that really resonated with me. So I was like, okay, she might have the juice, but I'm still not sure if she's the one, you know. And I really feel like it's so interesting because, and I think what it is that those 2 former versions of Nicole were just so like ready to cling on to somebody, because I just felt so desperate because I needed to talk to somebody, and they just so happened to be good fits for me, is that it worked. But now, because of where I am now, and it's not coming from a place of desperation, it's coming from a place of desire. I'm very selective of who I want to talk to and who I want to be in my business, so to speak. So yeah, we shall see, and I'll keep you guys updated of if this therapist works out or if I go on another therapist hunt. But yeah, on this time, I'm not going through an app. I'm going through the list that my insurance provider provided, basically. So this is also a new route too. Even though we still do virtual sessions, she's also located in my city. So on Saturdays, if I wanted to like meet her face to face in person, we could. So yeah, you guys, that was a long kind of like, I won't say too long, but it was kind of like just giving my experience of therapy as a Black woman, how it's helped me, how it's molded me, why I got into therapy in the first place, kind of the avenues I went into therapy, like through the apps or, you know, word of mouth. Sometimes you can find therapists through word of mouth and things like that. And also too, some of the apprehensions, like the stigma in the Black community of like talking to a therapist. Also the money factor, because sometimes I feel like it's unfortunate that we live in a world where therapy is actually like a privilege or like a luxury, and it shouldn't be, because we need help. We need places to resolve our mental health problems and issues, just like we need places to resolve our physical health ailments and things like that. So it's just unfortunate, you know, healthcare. I don't even want to get into that topic. But yeah, hopefully you guys got something out of it. I enjoyed filming this video because it was interesting going just in my mind down memory lane about like, girl, you actually in therapy. You was 19 when you first said you want to talk to somebody, and now you're actually talking to somebody, a lot of somebody's you talk to. So yeah, I've also too, in between all of that, I've had like a life coach that I talk to here and there. So I'm always talking to somebody. And I will say this, there is nothing like, what therapy has been for me the most is self-care. And I mean self-care in this way. There is nothing like having an hour every week to get on the phone with somebody, and their whole mission is they're there for you and for you to talk about whatever you got going on. Like, you don't realize how much a relief that is, because for a lot of people, and especially for a lot of Black women, we are everything for everybody else, and nobody is asking us what we got going on. And even if they're asking, they're not sitting around to listen. So having somebody there to listen to you for an hour every week, that's so necessary. And I don't ever want to not have that in my life. Whether that be through therapy, whether that be through community, whether that be through other relationships, like, that for me is a part of my self-care routine. I need an hour, at least an hour a week, to unleash everything that is in here, in my mind, in my thoughts, and my feelings, and my body. Like, I need at least an hour to do that. So that's it for this video. Drop your comments below. Have you been to therapy? What has been your experience? Do you want to get in therapy? If so, why haven't you? What has held you back? Have you dealt with stigmas? Let's just continue the conversation in the comment section below. All right, you guys, that is it. Until next time, peace.